Siempre Soups is a plant-based company whose goal is to bring soup back to its roots. We're joined today by the company's founder, Alison Velázquez, and one of my personal friends. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, first question of the day, what were the initial steps you had to take before starting your food business?
You know, the initial steps were kind of what a lot of people have to do for any business. It was first setting up a legal entity for it, then registering with the city that I was living in, and then specifically for food though, the next thing you wanted to do is get a reseller license.
Oh.
So a reseller license is something that lets you go in buy, for me like produce and not have to pay taxes on it because
Okay.
I'm going to essentially repackage it and resell it to a consumer.
And so Whole Foods has that kind of setup, right? For vendors to have kind of like a wholesale situation through them.
Right, exactly. So if I'm selling into retail, then I'm wholesaling into them. So that means like only one person should be paying the taxes on it. So ultimately it's going to be the consumer. So I get that certificate so I don't have to pay the taxes.
Got it. And so are there any sort of regulations around like test kitchens or handling food or things like that for startups or entrepreneurs looking to start a food brand?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously food safety is one of the most important concerns when it comes to that. So it really depends on if you yourself are self-manufacturing or if you're outsourcing your manufacturing. But either way, there needs to be some level of food safety. When I started self-manufacturing at first, I had a food manager sanitation certificate I had to get.
Okay, interesting. And you're also a chef, so you know what's up.
Yeah.
Right? Awesome. And so when it came to the time that you were outsourcing ingredients and outsourcing manufacturing, what's the process of finding vendors?
So vendors, it's a pretty complicated process, to be honest. Yeah, you really want to start first by looking at what your process is, like how you actually create your product, because that's really going to depend on what the specifications are of the ingredients that you're purchasing.
Got it.
So then once you kind of have that down, you can understand what those specs are, then you can go out to the marketplace and start talking to vendors, see who offers what, and then obviously price is like next thing that's really important to start comparing.
Amazing. And I know you're in so many fabulous retail locations, and that took a lot of work. I remember when we were chatting when you were first starting out, and I know that's obviously the goal of every food company is to get into retail. So what does that journey entail? How does a food company get into retail?
Yes, definitely want lots of doors. So getting into retail is really honestly kind of a complicated process. First of all, you want to, before you even approach a buyer, really make sure that your product is buttoned up. And when I mean buttoned up, I mean you want to make sure that you have retail ready packaging, something that can sit on the shelf in a retail store that's going to be appealing to customers and that's going to move off the shelf hopefully. So once you kind of have all of that in place, you want to make sure that you have your pricing model set up. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you can actually produce enough product for whatever the retailer is that you're going into. The last thing you want to do is get a purchase order from a huge retailer and not be able to fulfill it.
So that means you have to kind of outgrow your at-home kitchen type of situation, right?
At a certain point, yes. It depends, like maybe you want to start going into some smaller little boutique-y retailers where you can self-produce, but eventually if you look to moving into a mass retailer, you really need to outsource your manufacturing.
And for any sort of new companies, is there any sort of regulations that comes into play when it comes to getting into retail?
There are definitely, they have food safety, regulations that you need to abide by, and then depending on the retailer, there's also, different kind of rules that they're looking for regarding their ingredient list that they'll accept.
Oh, interesting. I know Whole Foods is pretty tricky.
Yes, that's exactly who I was kind of thinking of. They are very strict about the kind of ingredients and anything, packaging and so forth that comes into their store.
Great, good stuff. Well, Alison, thank you so much for joining me and talking with us today on Talking Plant Protein, and we'll see you guys all later.